Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are nearing the late stages of the 2032 to 2033 off season. We're a couple weeks into the preseason, and we're only 2 weeks away from the start of spring training. And I think all we're going to cover in this episode is those next 2 weeks, so it should be a relatively quick episode. It's already relatively late in the evening, a long day at work, and want to try to get a little bit of content out to the loyal viewers of this channel and hopefully some new viewers as well. But I don't think it's going to be a long episode today. First of all, thanks to everyone as usual for the comments in reaction to our last video. Seems pretty unanimous, whether it's Stanley Rosella, Dralix, or William Ashman, that people are meh on our acquisition of Jordan Westburg at best. I get it. $12 million for him this coming season is a lot, but we've got a lot of money to spend. And I do like the fact that we have control of him for up to 3 seasons at pretty good numbers for those next 2 years if he produces. If he doesn't produce this year, we spent some money. We needed to spend it on somebody anyways. From my perspective, he's a guy who at first, second, or third can play competent to excellent defense for us if he's at first base, and could also fill in at shortstop in a pinch. Hopefully we won't get to the point where we need that. And he's an above average hitter. You look over the course of his career, and he's certainly been above average pretty much every season. You know, back in the day, he had some of his best seasons, quite honestly, with us before we decided to move on from him. So it's going to be a bit of a homecoming as well. We moved on from him when he was getting a little bit more expensive than we thought we wanted to pay for him. But some things come full circle, and certainly Westburg's return to the Buffalo Wings is going to be one of those. He could be a one-and-done guy with us if he ends up getting hurt or is incredibly unproductive, or he could be with us for the next 2 or 3 seasons. I get the point that maybe if we had waited, we would have been able to get him cheaper. He certainly is the type of guy whose profile is that if he stays on the market for another few weeks, we could potentially get him from less. He was looking for $14.6 million in 5 years originally. When we ended up signing him, he was looking for over $10 million a year for 4 years. So the fact that we were able to get him at a front-loaded average of 8 for 3, I think is good progress. But certainly could have gotten a better deal on him if we had potentially risked waiting. The way that I felt, though, he was the last bat available in free agency that I felt was an above average bat who could also help us a little bit defensively. So given that we had done nothing else in free agency and we've got plenty of money to spend this offseason, decided to bring him on board. We'll see how it works out this year and maybe the next couple of seasons. And when we think about what else we want to do over these next couple of weeks till spring training starts, we've got tons of money to spend. I don't think at this point we're going to throw it at anyone else in the free agent market. If there's a bargain or two 4, 6, 8 weeks from now, certainly would think about bringing somebody on board. But I think if we're going to spend any money, it's going to be by bringing on someone, making some money in a trade. But if we don't spend a lot of money on that, that'll give us the optionality to potentially bring on some salary when we get closer to the trade deadline, or also, as some of you have suggested and we've talked about in the past, use that money to draft some players who are impossible to sign and fall in the draft, or looking for way above slot and happen to fall in the draft, and kind of hopefully leverage an extra prospect or two that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to afford. So there's plenty of things that we can do with the money, but there still are two potential holes on the team that we want to fill. First and foremost is a left-handed hitter with power. Right now, we are probably as right-handed oriented in our potential team as we have ever been. We've got Juan Estrada, the young two-way player who is a left-handed hitter. Think he'll eventually hit for a nice average and draw a lot of walks, but he's got no power. Cam Collier and John Featherston have kind of been 12, 15, 18 home run guys over the course of their career, so they're not going to make a big difference in terms of the power and the home runs from the left side either. Switch hitter Adley Rutschman, still one of the top, if not the top, catchers in all of baseball. Will be batting left-handed when we're facing right-handed pitching, which will be the majority of the time. Another guy who at this point in his career, though, is more of a 15 to 20 home run guy rather than a major power hitter. So a lefty who can hit the ball out of the ballpark is a key thing we're thinking about. We have not forgotten, and some of you, noted this in your comments to the last episode, that we do still have Mike Heiner coming up this year, or potentially coming up this year. And I'm certainly not going to let bringing Westburg on board keep Heiner away from getting at bats at first base if that's where we decide to play him. He could obviously be a corner outfielder for us as well. But Heiner hopefully is a little bit of our ace in the hole as far as a left-handed bat who can hit the ball out of the park. He was our first-round draft pick out of Bradley last season, had a very quick and effective rise through our organization last year, and is pretty much ready to go. He will certainly be up with us, if not right at the start of the season, then within a few weeks of when the season starts, assuming he's healthy. The only reason to keep him down would be to evilly and selfishly and gamely manipulate his service time to have control over him for a little bit longer. But Heiner will obviously be up here, and we're not going to let Westburg stand in his way. That said, I still would not mind bringing on another good left-handed hitter. We are getting to the point where, when we think about the future, Vance Honeycutt, who's been a pretty effective right-handed hitter for us throughout his career, is a potential free agent after this season. So that is a pretty big bat that we will potentially have to replace. So if we're able to find another first baseman / DH / corner outfielder with a good bat, won't mind bringing that player on board now. And if we have a extra bat who lingers on the bench a little bit this upcoming season, I'm not going to complain about it, because after the way our offense performed last year and the fact that we have lost our top 2 home run hitters from last season, investing a little more in the offense is not something I'm going to regret. The other lesser need that I'm thinking about potentially in free agency in the trade market is a backup catcher for Adley Rutschman. We did pick the youngster Andres Valenzuela in the Rule 5 draft. He's never been above Double-A. He was pretty successful there last year, and his bat looks like it could be interesting for a catcher, particularly at the major league level if he's fully developed. Doesn't bring much to the table defensively, but he's going to be competing for a backup catcher spot. And then we also still have, if I can figure out what position I've been forcing him at, Josh Springer, who was our backup catcher in the majors for the season and a half of the past 2 seasons. We ended up moving on from him, sent him down to the minors around the All-Star break last year when we made a trade for a backup catcher who was a little bit better defensively than Springer. But Springer is certainly in the mix to be a backup catcher. But that backup catcher that we brought on last year that I mentioned, Ivan Herrera, is still on the free agent market. And so we are scouting free agent Ivan Herrera as well as 3 younger catchers to get updated reports on them. We are scouting several left-handed hitting players with potentially interesting bats that we could try to trade for. And then, although he's a right-handed hitter, Ronald Acuna Jr. is on the trade block by the Texas Rangers. So we're going to try to get updated scouting reports on all of these players over the next week, week and a half. And perhaps we will be able to work something out in the trade market to bring on either that left-handed bat that we're looking for to really bolster our offense, a potential upgrade at backup catcher, or who knows, a highly paid player who we could afford to take on this salary in the last year of his contract. He is fragile, and he is another right-handed hitter, but certainly you look at what Acuna Jr. has done over the course of his career, and although he's 35 now and fragile, closing in on 2,000 career hits, 400 home runs, probably still more than a season away from that. Even if he hits a career high or ties a career high 41 this year, he's still not going to get there this season. I don't think, given that he's a right-handed hitter and that's not really our need right now, that he will end up being the guy that we go for right now. But it's also conceivable, given that he is in the last year of his contract and he's already on the trade block, that if Texas has a rough season this year, he could be available 4 or 5 months from now as we get closer to the trade deadline. And who knows what our needs will look like at that time. And we have also gotten one more international amateur free agent signed, starting pitcher David Alvarado. Don't think he's a big-time prospect, but we didn't have a lot of money left at this point. One more lottery ticket to hope for from some unexpected development, kind of similar to what we've been experiencing with Sincere Shazier over the last season plus. Probably going to be a guy who at most makes it to A-ball, but it's another body, and it's a cheap body that we brought on board, so we'll see what David Alvarado can do in the minor leagues in the coming years. And we've gotten all of the scouting reports back that I mentioned we were trying to get on potential left-handed hitters and potential catchers. We have an offer out for a hitter, and we're going to have to give up a lot to pick up this hitter. I don't think some of you are going to like what we're doing. I don't know if I like what we're potentially doing because we've already offered one big player in the deal. And I expect that we're going to hear back and have to offer more than that, but we'll revisit that shortly. We also did dig in on trying to potentially reunite with the young catcher Andres Medina, who used to be one of the top prospects in our system. Then he was a top prospect in the Phillies system, and he finally made his major league debut this past year. Looks like the price for him is still going to be prohibitive. So we have actually made an offer for 1 year to reunite with Ivan Herrera as our potential backup catcher for next year. Don't know whether the deal will go through or not. He wasn't too happy with us by the time he said he would think about an offer for $2 million a year, but think that at that amount, with the money that we've got to spend this year, he would certainly be an upgrade over Springer. And I am just not Not 100% sure that the young Andres Valenzuela is the answer. I think he's a really interesting prospect, but as a win now team focused on pitching, I'd prefer that our backup catcher be a little bit stronger defensively. Again, signing Herrera doesn't preclude us from keeping Valenzuela on the 26-man roster if we think it's the right decision, but it certainly, to be fair, would make the probability of that lower than it is today. And I've got a trade that I'm going to think about executing on here, and this is the trade that I had brewing that I think some of you may dislike a lot. I have some concerns about it because I'm going to be giving up one of the top young players in our organization and someone who I've been thinking about building this team around for a good couple of seasons now when he's finally started to break through. We have to throw in a decent player to still get this deal done in most cases, but we can also throw in minor league second baseman veteran Wenceel Perez. So we'll certainly throw him in to get the deal done. We also have to throw in David Aranya, who you may remember was a Rule 5 pick of ours a couple seasons ago. Did a nice job with us in Buffalo in 2031. We got him some more seasoning in Albany last year where he was really good. 12-5 record, 3.60 ERA, 1.33 ERA plus. 27-year-old pitcher, throws in the high 90s, 3-pitch guy, durable, has enough stamina to be a 4 to 5 inning starter. So he's definitely a useful player, but realistically is a right-handed arm out of the bullpen for us. So if including him helps get a deal done, which it does in this case, don't have a problem moving on from him. As I said in my rant about the Yankees yesterday, a right-handed middle reliever to me is the most commoditized asset probably in Major League Baseball. So have to be consistent and be willing to put in a player like Aranya. But I am considering giving up the number 84 prospect in baseball, Mr. Joe Edwards, who finally made his Major League debut with us last year. And he has had some monster years in our farm system at this point. 23 homers in Class A ball in 2030, combined for 51 homers and 107 ribbies in High A and Double A in 2031. And then last year had a monstrous 43 home runs and 446 at-bats in Triple A, added 3 more when he made his Major League debut. And he is a guy who can play competently all over the field, which is very valuable. He's a guy who has off-the-chart ability to draw walks, which is very valuable, particularly for our team where we don't have a lot of guys who that's a great skill of theirs. And clearly he's already an accomplished home run hitter, and we think he can get better. The drawback on him, in my concern, is that he struck out a crazy amount, 180 strikeouts last year between AAA and the majors. He's also almost 24 years old, and his avoid strikeouts is still 35. There's a chance he gets up to 45. Most likely he probably ends up at 40, which is still a guy who's going to strike out well over 100 times a year. And if he ends up at a 35, that's a guy who's probably a Joey Gallo or Reggie Jackson, Gorman Thomas type strikeout totals. So strikeouts are my concern with Edwards. That said, our new excellent scout still views him as a 5-star potential guy. And I really like him. But I can argue to myself that with Seifu signed for several more years at second, Collier at third, getting closer to the end of his arbitration, but a guy we might want to extend. Hull still only a couple years into his career, so he's still making the minimum, and then has arbitration years ahead of him at short. And then potentially Heiner, who could be a first baseman for us. Westberg is a super utility guy that we just signed. And then for at least this upcoming season, Adames is another utility infielder for us. To say nothing of Henry Allen and Vaughn Necker, who have both kind of filled utility infield roles for us over the last 1 and 2 years, respectively. I can argue that I don't. Oh, I can't argue that I don't have a spot for Edwards. I would find a spot for him in the lineup. But I can argue that I don't need him. And the guy that we are trying to pick up for this offer is pretty intriguing to me. 25-year-old right fielder Bobby Bolig, who hit .292 with 20 homers last year in his first full season in the majors. He is a competent defensive corner outfielder with decent range. He's got decent speed on the base paths. He's a good bunter. And he's a guy who is a pretty good hitting profile. And he's also a left-handed hitter, which we could use. Admittedly, he's probably only going to strike out a little bit less than Edwards does when all is said and done. But the rest of his profile is a little more balanced. He doesn't have as great an eye as Edwards, clearly, and his home run power isn't quite as high, but his contact and his gap power are both better. He's a left-handed hitter. And when we look at his ratings, he looks like he can be an absolute monster against right-handed pitching. He's got some crazy splits, quite honestly, with the number of good right-handed hitters we have on the roster at this point. Honestly, bolstered by Westberg, who we signed as a free agent, and even a guy like Gavin Grayovac. We've got right-handed bats that could platoon with Bolig. It seems kind of crazy to be bringing on a 25-year-old guy and trading away one of the top prospects in our system to pick up a guy who we view as just a platoon player. But he's pretty dominant against the type of pitcher that you're going to be facing 70 to 80% of the time in the platoon. And when we look at his batting stats over the admittedly small sample size of a year and a half in the majors, his WRC plus is 137. When we look at what he's done against right-handed hitters, it's 151. I mean, he has just been a devastating hitter against right-handed pitching. 300 batting average, OPS over 900. And when I look at that profile, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect him to remain pretty productive. Against left-handed hitters, he's below average and well below average over the course of his career offensively. So I do struggle with this one a bit because Edwards does have completely even looking ratings and potentially even looking splits. Edwards, although not as dynamic defensively and not as good in the outfield, you do have the advantage with Edwards is that he is someone who could play first, second, or third, and even short for us if we needed him in a pinch. But the left-handed bat of Bolig is very intriguing to me. Aranya I don't like giving up, but certainly not going to hold up a trade because of him. And then obviously we'll throw in a veteran minor leaguer with a great personality that they can use in their minor league system, rather than a top prospect to get the deal done. But my thought is, Edwards is a lot to give up. There's no doubt about it. But Bolig is a pretty intriguing player, and he's only a year and a half older. He's only been in the majors for a year and a half at this point, so he's still making the major league minimum and then under control for 3 more seasons after that in his arbitration years. It might be 2 more years at the minimum too. I'll have to look at the service time more closely. Certainly the ceiling on Bolig doesn't appear as high according to our scout, but again, his contact is 10 points higher, his gap power is 25 points higher, and he has the speed to be just knocking doubles and triples all over the place, particularly in our park. Home run power is the same now, although certainly Edwards has more potential there. Edwards is going to draw a lot more walks, and like I said, the strikeouts favors Bolig a little now. Probably ultimately will favor Bolig a little bit, although certainly, when we look at these players' potential, the gap closes. Assuming they both meet their full potential, Bolig's 10 points better with contact, way better with gap power, a little worse with home run power, way worse with eye, and then they're even in terms of their avoiding strikeouts. Edwards is a guy who you can play every day. Bolig, quite realistically, is a guy that we're only going to want to play against right-handed pitching, but if you can put up a 150 OPS plus against right-handed pitching, and then you've got that bat on your bench to pinch hit when you're facing a lefty starter, and then you've got him for when a right-handed reliever comes in. There's definitely some value there. Bolig's certainly much better in bunting, speed, base running instinct, stealing bases, much better than Edwards in those categories. And taking a look at defensive things, certainly Bolig, as we talked about, is a better defensive outfielder. Edwards clearly much more versatile overall. First base is really the only position Bolig could play in the infield, and at 4 inches shorter than Edwards, with worse infielder ratings across the board, he would not be nearly as good there. So this is one where I think I'm leaning towards making the trade. I wouldn't be talking about it if I wasn't. But it's not an easy decision. And would love to kind of hear thoughts from any of you who are still watching this video on which direction you would go. Again, Wenceel Perez could care less. David Aranya, there is some value there. He certainly helps get the deal done, but not going to hold up things for him. To me, it's really still just about, do I prefer Edwards, who's almost 24 years old, or do I prefer Bolig, who's going to be turning 26 in the middle of this upcoming season? And I think I am leaning towards taking the player who likely has a higher floor but a lower ceiling in Bolig, because I just think that bat against right-handed pitching is potentially incredible. And he's got 1 year, 70 days of major league service, so he's the minimum this year, and he'll still be the minimum next year as well, most likely. So how much Edwards has only come up for 34 days. So I think Edwards is still a year behind him in terms of service time. There's an extra year of control of Edwards making the major league minimum, which is certainly valuable. But if you've got thoughts on which direction to go with this, would love to hear them. Like I said, my big concern with Edwards is that he's just going to strike out an insane amount of time. And if that contact doesn't continue to develop, which I do think it will ultimately, I think he's going to get at least up to average contact. And hopefully he'll improve another notch in avoiding strikeouts. But if those things don't happen, Bolig is clearly a superior guy that you'd want to have for the medium to long term. And Bolig struck out 133 times in 504 at-bats at the major league level. So he's going to strike out a lot, but not at an Edwardsian pace. So if you've got thoughts on what we should do, I'd love to hear them in the comments. I think I'm leaning towards making this deal. And I imagine some of you think I'm crazy for giving up on Edwards. But I really think that potentially adding Bolig and Heiner as left-handed batters into this lineup, both young guys, gives us two potentially huge left-handed bats to build this team around for the next several years. And I feel that with guys like Seifu, Honeycutt if we keep him, Hull if he keeps hitting well, that we've kind of still got enough right-handed bats. Losing Edwards definitely will leave a gap in our system, but Tyreek Hardage, who is a right-handed hitter, is not that far away. Split last year between high A ball and double A, where he combined for 30 homers between the two levels. Don't think he's going to be a huge home run hitter. Clearly he's not, but he's got the potential to be an excellent center fielder defensively with that 70 range. Another guy who should be really good on the base paths. And he does potentially have a pretty well balanced and overall above average offensive profile. Now he is a guy who's better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching, at least at this point and likely going forward. He does not replace what I think Edwards can be offensively, but it is a right-handed bat that's not too far away. Dave Zapp, the number 83 prospect in baseball, split last year between A and high A. Another right-handed hitter who's going to end up as a corner outfielder or first baseman. Again, doesn't look like he's going to have quite the same power as Edwards, but he could get there if he fully develops. Certainly not the same kind of eye. So I don't think either Zapp or Hardage, who are the two closest to the majors right-handed hitters in our system, are going to fully replace Edwards. But I'm definitely intrigued by Bobby Bolig. So if you've got thoughts on which direction we should go, would love to hear them. And I will let you know what decision I have made in our next episode, after I've factored in the input that hopefully some of you are willing to share with me. And I know that some of you are always willing to share your thoughts with me, and even when I don't agree with them, I appreciate it. So if you can help me with this decision, or at least share your thoughts with me on this decision, would love to hear them. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.